Hi. I don't know if I can hear myself. Let me check. Oh, yep, I can hear myself. Kind of quiet though. I'm going now. Hello, hello. Is anybody in there? What? Hi. Well, I guess I'm going. I seem. I feel like I'm very quiet for some reason. Ugh. Hold on. I'm not even completely set up yet. I apologize. Come on. I had not gotten VTube Studio up on my phone yet. Ah? Okay, now I'm on. So, how's everyone doing? Yeah. It has been a month since the last time I did a fairy tale stream. I guess it's just because my Fridays have been sucking and I haven't felt like being up to it. But Friday's also when I usually plug the book and all that crap, so I haven't updated my banner yet. Huh. But anyway, for those of you who don't know, I'm Gentrin Valkyrie, the Wolf Storyteller. And I not only tell stories, but I am trying to sell stories as well. And I say that because I have released a book of fairy tales. So if you're interested, those are the links for them. Those are the ones on Amazon anyway. Yeah. But yeah, not only do I try to sell my own fairy tales, but also try to help people find other books. Because I also have affiliate setups with other bookstores. So if you need a book, you can contact me and I can try to find it for you, or you can go to my links and check for yourself. Those are It's basically, I just want to encourage people to read, and I'm trying to find ways to do it, while unfortunately also getting paid at the same time. That's not the easiest thing to do. It wasn't exactly easy to get the affiliates either. But I encourage reading. People who grow up reading fairy tales are more likely to kind of have their own basis of moral judgments and generally be better adults. Because if you think about it, fairy tales are what they used to teach people before there were open access to schools. They would teach moral lessons when, churches weren't exactly openly available either. They would tell you how to know if someone's playing a trick on you. They would teach you generally how a good person should be. So I really do encourage the reading of fairy tales. And not the Disneyfied versions of them. I mean, go to the source material. It may be gruesome, may have touches of horror, but these explained how to live. I mean, admittedly, a lot of them do say that if you become a widow or widower to stay that way instead of marrying someone else, because clearly the stepmother would be evil. Do not follow someone just because they believe that they're better than you. Do not favor your children nor be cruel to children. Because when you favor your own over someone else's, nothing good can really come of it. But fairy tales, they are meant to be lessons. Which is why I like reading them so often. And I really wish more people could. And when I did my book, I tried to explain and emphasize things that happened in them. And why there should be lessons to be learned. Generally, they shouldn't have to have this. Being kind to another person. Just not being cruel or rude or evil. Because, honestly, you never know if it's going to be a fairy who wants vengeance because of it. I mean, that should only make sense, right? Being good to others, honestly, should be its own reward, but it isn't always. And generally, just try to be a good person. I mean, it shouldn't be that hard of a thing to do. Uh, I've got to get a drink because that's really fucking hot. Okay. So anyway, we're back to fairy tales tonight. I was looking at it. I haven't done any since June. So we're well behind in our reading schedule. It still looks like I've got a third of this book to go. Something quick. Also, it doesn't feel like anything I'm doing is real quick right now. Uh, oh, excuse me. Okay. Let me get just the link to my store stuff up here. I guess I could put a note on it. Okay. Try this again. I really hate that Twitter's X. Okay. It is now the pinned message on here, but it's also the the pinned tweet on my profile. So if you need a book, you can check out my links, go to my links, or hell, even ask me to see if I can find it for you, because I really have nothing else to do. But anyway, enough of these sales and shenaniganery. I don't know if my Fosabot's going to work, so I'm going to type a name. Someone who's usually asleep by now, and see if it actually does its proper programming. Okay, well, Fosabot is awake. Stream Elements is not perfect right now. It's supposed to be having Kel do the announcements. Oh. Oh, for fuck's sake, I don't remember what the password is from that account. What was that? Oh, it's not the one. Connection. Connection. Okay. That's what I was looking for. Why is it not? Okay, that's Firefox. I did on her. I really do want to get this stuff set up, honestly. Not this one. Google the password manager. There we go. Oh, that would have just been easy for me to remember if I'd remembered I had it. And of course, it's going to make me do the confirmation. So, one, I need to get this one, that code. Too many levels. That one. By the time I get there, I forgot what it was. Okay. There we go. Okay, that was stupid. It said it wasn't the right one, then it accepted it anyway. I just want to make sure that the bot is working. Okay, now let me go back to my scenes. What the hell? Okay. Stream elements, why must you be such a bitch? I'm going to check something because I don't know what's an accident or not. Oh. Okay, it's not one to choose with chat. Okay, oh, that's interesting. It's funny it's all that says Country in the Wanderer. Huh. But I want my chat bot to actually pop up the way it's supposed to. Streaming tools, no chatbots. Chat commands. Normally I would be in the fairy tales already, but timers. Okay, I want to. Hold on. Da da da. Da da da. Ouch. Ugh. Hmm. Where are my tests? Guess I should get the. Mm-hmm. Okay, I really want to test the bots. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, why can I not run my bot tests? Okay, stream elements. What are you doing? Tools. Okay, I don't know. Let's go ahead and hold on. Where am I? Oh, there's the library chat. Let's just go ahead and see if I can get into reading. But again, we are back to fairy tales, and we're haven't done fairy tales for a month. I have to remember how to do this. No, I don't. I've been reading Sherlock Holmes. I just haven't done my Fridays. Again, I probably won't acknowledge until I'm between stories. Fortunately, stories aren't nearly as long as chapters, so I will try to respond a lot easier with this. So, without any further ado, because we've already had much ado about nothing. Nothing? Nothing? Okay. Our first story, The Golden Lion, from the Pink Fairy book. There once was a rich merchant who had 3 sons, and when they were grown up, the eldest said to him, "Father, I wish to travel and see the world. I pray you let me." So the father ordered a beautiful ship to be fitted up, and the young man sailed away in it. After some weeks, the vessel cast anchor before a large town, and the merchant's son went on shore. The first thing he saw was a large notice written on a board saying that if any man could find the king's daughter within 8 days, he should have her to wife. But he that's tried and failed, his head must be forfeit. What to do when you don't want your daughter to marry? Well, thought the youth as he read this proclamation, that ought to be a very difficult matter. And he asked an audience with the king, and told him that he wished to seek for the princess. "Certainly," replied the king. "You have the whole palace to search in, but remember, if you fail, it will cost you your head." So saying, he commanded the doors to be thrown open, and food and drink to be set before the young man, who, after he had eaten, began to look for the princess. But though he visited every corner and chest and cupboard, she was not in any of them. And after 8 days he gave it up, and his head was cut off. All this time his father and brothers had had no news of him, and were very anxious. Guilty. At last the second son could bear it no longer, and said, "Dear father, give me, I pray you, a large ship and some money, and let me go and seek for my brother." So another ship was fitted out, and the young man sailed away, and was blown by the wind into the same harbor where his brother had landed. Now, when he saw the first ship lying at anchor, his heart beat high, and he said to himself, "My brother surely cannot be far." And he ordered a boat and was put on shore. He jumped on the pier. His eye caught the notice about the princess, and he thought, "He has undertaken to find her, and has certainly lost his head. I must try myself and seek him as well as her. I cannot be such a very difficult matter." But he fared no better than his brother, and in 8 days he too lost his head. So now there was only the youngest at home, and when the other two never came back, he also begged for a ship that he might go in search of his lost brothers. And when the vessel started, a high wind arose and blew him straight to the harbor where the notice was set. "Oh," he cried, "whoever can find the king's daughter shall have her to wife. It is quite clear now what has befallen my brothers. But in spite of what I think, I must try my luck." And he took the road to the castle. On the way, he met an old woman who stopped and begged. "Leave me in peace, old woman," replied he. "Oh, do not send me away empty," she said. "You are such a handsome young man, you will surely not refuse an old woman a few pence." "I told you, old woman, leave me alone." "You are in some trouble?" she asked. "Tell me what it is, and perhaps I can help you." Then he told her how he had set his heart on finding the king's daughter. "I can easily manage that for you, as long as you have enough money." "Oh, as to that, I have plenty," answered he. "Well, you must go take it to a goldsmith and get him to make it into glasses." Hold on. I need glasses because I read that wrong. "Well, you must take it to a goldsmith and get him to make it into a golden lion with eyes of crystal, and inside it must be something that will enable you to play tunes. When it is ready, bring it to me." The young man did as he was bid, and when the lion was made, the old woman hid the youth in it. He brought it to the king, who was so delighted that he wanted to buy it. But she replied, "It does not belong to me, and my master will not part from it at any price." "At any rate, leave it with me for a few days," said he. "I should like to show it to my daughter." "Yes, I can do that," answered the old woman. "But tomorrow I must have it back again." And she went away. The king watched her till she was quite out of sight, so as to make sure that she was not spying upon him. Then he took the golden lion into his room, and lifted up some loose boards from the floor. Below the floor there was a staircase, which he went down till he reached a door at the foot of them. This he unlocked, and found himself in a narrow passage closed by another door, which he also opened. The young man, hidden in the golden lion, kept count of everything, and marked that there were in all 7 doors. After they had been unlocked, the king entered a lovely hall where the princess was amusing herself with 11 friends. all 12 girls wore the same clothes and were as like each other as 2 peas. What bad luck, thought the youth. Even supposing I managed to find my way here again, I don't see how I could ever tell which was a princess. And he stared hard at the princess as she clapped her hands with joy and ran up to them crying, "Oh, do let us keep the delicious beast for tonight. It will make such a nice plaything." Yeah. The king did not stay long, and when he left, he handed over the lion to the maidens, who amused themselves for some time with it, till they got sleepy and thought it was time to go to bed. But the princess took the lion into her own room and laid it on the floor. She was just beginning to doze when she heard a soft voice quite close to her, which made her jump. "Oh, lovely princess, if you only knew what I have gone through to find you." The princess jumped out of bed screaming, "The lion! The lion!" But her friends thought it was a nightmare and did not trouble themselves to get up. "Oh, lovely princess," continued the voice, "fear nothing. I am the son of a rich merchant, and desire above all things to have you for my wife. And in order to get to you, I have hid myself in this golden lion." "What use is that?" continued asked the princess. "For if you cannot pick me out from among my companions, you will still lose your head." "I look to you to help me," he said. "I have done so much for you that you might do this one thing for me." The next morning the king came very early to fetch the lion, as the old woman was already in the palace asking for it. When they were safe from view, she let the young man out, and he returned to the king and told him that he wished to find the princess. "Very good," said the king, who by this time was almost tired of repeating the same words. "But if you fail, your head will be forfeit." So the youth remained quietly in the castle, eating and looking at all the beautiful things around him, every now and then pretending to be searching busily in the closets and corners. On the 8th day he entered the room where the king was sitting. "Take up the floor in this place," he said. The king gave a cry, but stopped himself, and asked, "What do you want the floor up for? There's nothing there." But all his courtiers were watching him, and he did not like to make any more objections, and ordered the floor to be taken up, as the young man desired. The youth then went straight down the staircase till he reached the door. Then he turned and demanded the key that should be brought. So the king was forced to unlock the door, and the next, and the next, and the next, until all 7 were open. And they entered the hall where the 12 maidens were all standing in a row, so like that none might tell them apart. But as he looked, one of them silently drew a white sash from her pocket and slipped it around her waist. And the young man sprang to her and said, "This is the princess, and I claim her for my wife." And the king owned himself deep, and commanded that the wedding feast should be held. After 8 days, the bridal pair said farewell to the king and set sail for the youth's own country, taking with them a whole shipload of treasures as the princess's dowry. But they did not forget the old woman who had brought them all their happiness, and they gave her enough money to make herself comfortable to the end of her days. Honestly, the gold from the gold lion that she apparently kept would have been able to do that. And that was essentially her finder's fee to start with. Maybe they filled the gold lion with treasure and that was, I don't know. I mean, a gold lion big enough to hide a human being in. Would have probably been worth a pretty farthing or two back then. Oh, no. I was about to panic. I thought I closed my book without a bookmark in it. Huh. Oh well. That's why I keep so many bookmarks at my desk. Okay. Dare I... Oh, it's not letting me do a commercial. So I'll go ahead and continue going then. Maybe. Oh. Okay. Our next story, which might be slightly longer. I don't know. The Story of Sigurd. Actually, it's the Story of Sigurd. There's no F. So, try it again. The Story of Sigurd. From the Red Fairy Book. Once upon a time, there was a king in the north who had won many wars. But now, he was old. Yet he took a new wife, and then another prince who wanted to have married her came up against him with a great army. The old king went out and fought bravely, but at last his sword broke, and he was wounded, and his men fled. But in the night, when the battle was over, his young wife came out and searched for him among the slain, and at last she found him, and asked him whether he might be healed. But he said, no, his luck was gone, his sword was broken, he must die. Proper Viking. And he told her that she would have a son, and that son would be a great warrior, and would avenge him on the other king, his enemy. He bade her keep the broken pieces of the sword, and to make new the sword for his son, and that blade should be called Graham. And then he died. As his wife called her maid to her, she said, let us change clothes, and you shall be called by name, and I be yours, lest the enemy finds us. So this was done, and they hid in the wood. But there are some strangers met them, and carried them off to a ship to Denmark. And when they were brought before the king, he thought the maid looked like a queen, and the queen like a maid. So he asked the queen, how do you know in the dark of night whether the hours are wearing in the morning? And she said, I know because when I was younger, I used to have to rise and light the fires, and I still awaken at the same time. A strange queen to light the fires, thought the king. Then he asked the queen, who dressed like a maid. How do you know in the dark of night whether the hour is wearing near dawn? My father gave me a gold ring, she said, and always ere the dawning it grows cold on my finger. Interesting. A rich house where maids wear gold, said the king. Surely you are no maid, but a king's daughter. So he treated her royally, and as time went on, she had a son called Sigurd, a beautiful boy, and very strong. He had a tutor to be with him, and once the tutor bade him to go to the king and ask for a horse. Choose a horse for yourself, said the king, and Sigurd went into the wood, and there he met an old man with a white beard, and said, Come and help me in horse choosing. Then the old man said, Drive all the horses into the river. Choose the one that swims across. So Sigurd drove them, and only one swam across. Sigurd chose him. His name was Grani, and he came from Sleipnir's breed, and was the best horse in the world, for Sleipnir was the horse of Odin, the god of the north, and was as swift as the wind. But a day or two later his tutor said to Sigurd, There is a great treasure of gold hidden not far from here. It would become you to win it. But Sigurd answered, I have heard stories of this treasure, and I know that a dragon Fafnir guards it, and he is so huge and wicked that no man dares to go near him. He is no bigger than other dragons, said the tutor, and if you were to be as brave as your father, you would not fear him. I am no coward, said Sigurd. Why do you want me to fight with this dragon? Then his tutor, whose name was Regan, told him that all his great hoard of red gold had once belonged to his own father, and his father had 3 sons. The first was Fafnir the dragon. The second was Otter, who could put on the shape of an otter when he liked. Okay. And the next was himself, Regan, and he was a great smith and maker of swords. Now, there was at this time a dwarf called Andvari, who lived in a pool beneath a waterfall, and there he had hidden a great hoard of gold. And one day Otter had been fishing there, and had killed a salmon and eaten it, and was sleeping, like an otter, on a stone. Then someone came by and threw a stone at the otter and killed it, and flayed off his skin and took it to the house of Otter's father. Then he knew his son was dead, and to punish the person who had killed him, he said he must have the otter skin filled with gold, and covered all over with red gold, or it should go worse for him. Then the person who had killed Otter went down and brought the dwarf who owned all the treasure and took it from him. Only one ring was left the dwarf wore, and even that was taken from him. Then the poor dwarf was very angry, and he prayed that the gold might never bring any bad luck to all the men who might own it forever. Oh, bring anything but bad luck. Anything but bad luck makes more sense for hers. Then the otter skin was filled with gold and covered with gold, all but one hair. and that was covered with the poor dwarf's last ring. But it brought good luck to nobody. First, Fafnir the dragon killed his own father, and then he went and wallowed on the gold, and would let his brother have none, and no man dared go near. When Sigurd heard the story, he said to Regin, "Make me a good sword that I may kill this dragon." So Regin made a sword, and Sigurd tried it with a blow of a lump of iron, and the sword broke. Another sword he made, and Sigurd broke it too. Then Sigurd went to his mother and asked for the broken pieces of his father's blade, and gave them to Regin. And he hammered and wrought them into a new sword, so sharp that fire seemed to burn along its edges. Sigurd tried this blade on the lump of iron, and it did not break, but split the iron in two. Then he threw a lock of wool into the river, and when it floated down against the sword, it was cut into two pieces. So Sigurd said the sword would do. But before he went against the dragon, he led an army to fight the men who had killed his father, and slew their king, and took all their wealth, and went home. When he had been at home a few days, he rode out with Regin one morning to the heath where the dragon used to lie. Then he saw the track which the dragon made when he went to the cliff to drink. And the track was as if a great river had rolled along and left a deep valley. When Sigurd went down into that deep place and dug many pits into it, and in one of the pits he lay hidden with his sword drawn. There he waited, and presently the earth began to shake with the weight of the dragon as he crawled to the water. And a cloud of venom flew before him as he snorted and roared, so that it would have been death to stand before him. But Sigurd waited till half of him had crawled over the pit. Then he thrust the sword Gram right into his very heart. The dragon lashed with his tail till stones broke and trees crashed about him. And then he spoke as he died and said, "Whoever thou art has slain me. This gold shall be thy ruin, and ruin of all who own it." Sigurd said, "I would touch none of it by losing it, should I never die. But all men die, and no brave man lets death frighten him from his desire. Die thou, Fafnir." And then Fafnir died. And after that, Sigurd was called Fafnir's Bane and Dragon Slayer. Those titles are quite literal. Then Sigurd rode back and met Regin, and Regin asked him to roast Fafnir's heart and let him taste it. Roasted dragon heart. Does not taste it. So Sigurd put the heart of Fafnir on a stake and roasted it. But it chanced that he touched it with his finger, and it burned him. Okay. Then he put his finger in his mouth, and so tasted the heart of Fafnir. Then immediately he understood the language of birds, and he heard a woodpecker say,
There's Sigurd roasting Fafnir's heart for another, when he should taste it himself and learn all wisdom.
The next bird said,
There lies Regin, ready to betray Sigurd, who trusts him.
The third bird said,
Let him cut off Regin's head and keep all the gold to himself.
The fourth bird said,
Let him do, and then ride to Heinfell, to the place where Brynhild sleeps.
When Sigurd heard all of this and how Regin was plotting to betray him, he cut off Regin's head with one blow of the sword Gram. Then all the birds broke out singing. Please prepare your earplugs.
We know a fair maiden sleeping. Sigurd, be not afraid. Sigurd, win the maid. Fortune is keeping. High over Heinfeld red fire is flaming. There doth a maiden dwell. She that should love thee well. Meet for thy taming. There must she sleep till thou comest for her waking. Rise up and ride, for now sure she will swear the vow, fearless of breaking.
When Sigurd remembered how the story went that somewhere far away there was a beautiful lady enchanted, she was under a spell so that she must always sleep in a castle surrounded by flaming fire. There she must sleep forever till there came a knight who would ride through the fire and awaken her. There he determined to go, but first he rode right down to the horrible trail of Fafnir. And Fafnir had lived in a cave with iron doors. A cave dug deep down in the earth, and full of gold bracelets and crowns and rings. And there, too, Sigurd had found the Helm of Dread, a golden helmet, and whoever wears it is invisible. And all these he piled on the back of the good horse Grani, and then he rode south to Hindfell. Now it was night, and on the crest of the hill Sigurd saw that red fire blazing up in the sky, and within the flame a castle, and a banner on the topmost tower. There he set the horse Granny at the fire, and he leapt through it lightly as if it had been through a heather. So Sigurd went into the castle, and there he saw someone sleeping, clad all in armor. Then he took the helmet off of the head of the sleeper, and behold, she was the most beautiful lady. And she wakened and said,
Ah, it is Sigurd, Sigmund's son, who has broken the curse and come here to waken me at last.
The curse had come upon her when the thorn of the tree of sleep ran into her hand long ago for punishment because she had displeased Odin the god. Long ago, too, she had vowed to never marry a man who knew fear, and dared not ride through the fence of flaming fire, for she was a warrior maid herself, clearly, and went armed into battle like a man. But now she and Sigurd loved each other, and promised to be true to each other, and he gave her a ring, and it was the last ring taken from the dwarf Advari. Then Sigurd rode away and came to the house of a king who had a fair daughter, Her name was Gudrun, and her mother was a witch. Now Gudrun fell in love with Sigurd, but he was always talking of Brynhild, how beautiful she was, and how dear. So one day Gudrun's witch mother put poppy and forgetful drugs in a magical cup, and made Sigurd drink to her health. And he drank. And instantly he forgot poor Brynhild, and he loved Gudrun. And they were married, with great rejoicings. Now, the witch, the mother of Gudrun, wanted her son Gunnar to marry Brynhild, and she bade him to ride with Sigurd and go and woo her. So forth they rode to her father's house, for Brynhild had quite gone out of Sigurd's mind by reason of the witch's wine. But she remembered him and loved him still. Then Brynhild's father told Gunnar that she would marry none but him who could ride through flame in front of her enchanted tower. And thither they rode, and Gunnar set his horse at the flame, but he would not face it. Then Gunnar tried Sigurd's horse, Grani, but he would not move with Gunnar on his back. Then Gunnar remembered witchcraft that his mother had taught him, and by his magic he made Sigurd look exactly like himself, and he looked exactly like Gunnar. Then Sigurd, in the shape of Gunnar, and in his mail, mounted on Grani, and Grani leaped the fence of fire, and Sigurd went in and found Brynhild. But he did not remember her yet, because of the forgetful medicine in the cup of the witch's wine. Now Brynhild had no help but the promise she would be his wife, and the wife of Gunnar, as she supposed, for Sigurd wore Gunnar's shape. And she had sworn to wed whoever rode in the flames. And he gave her a ring, and she gave him back the ring he had given her before, in his own shape as Sigurd, and it was the last ring of the poor dwarf Advari. They're making a point of that. Then he rode out again, and he and Gunnar changed shapes, and each was himself again. Then they went home to the witch queens, and Sigurd gave her the dwarf's ring, dwarf's ring to his wife Gudrun. And Brynhild went to her father and said that the king had called Gunnar and had ridden the fire, and she must marry him.
Yet I thought, she said, that no man could have done this deed but Sigurd, Fafnir's bane, who is my true love. But he has forgotten me, and my promise I must keep.
So Gunnar and Brynhild were married, though it was not Gunnar, but Signar in Gunnar's shape that had ridden the fire. And when the wedding was over, and they all had feast, then the magic of the witch's wine went out of Sigurd's brain, and he remembered all. He remembered how he had freed Brynhild from the spell, and how she was his own true love, and how he had forgotten and had married another woman, and won Brynhild to be the wife of another man. But he was brave, and he spoke not a word of it for the others to make them unhappy. He still could not keep away the curse which was to come on everyone who owned the treasure of the dwarf Advari, and his fatal gold ring. And the curse soon came upon all of them, for one day when Brynhild and Gudrun were bathing, Brynhild waded farthest out into the river, and said she had to show she was Gudrun's superior, for her husband, she had said, had ridden through the flame when no other man dared face it. Then Gudrun was very angry, and said it was Sigurd, not Gunnar, who had ridden the flame, and had received from Brynhild the fatal ring, the ring of the dwarf and Vari. Then Brynhild saw the ring which Sigurd had given Gudrun, and knew it, and knew all. And she turned as pale as a dead woman, and went home. All that evening she never spoke. Next day she told Gunnar, her husband, that he was a coward and a liar, and he had never ridden through the flame, and had sent Sigurd to do it for him, and pretended that he had done it himself. And said she would never see her glad in his hall, never drinking wine, never playing chess, never embroidering with a golden thread, never speaking words of kindness. Then she rent all of her needlework asunder and wept aloud, so that everyone in the house heard her, for her heart was broken, and her pride was broken in the same hour. She had lost her true love Sigurd, the slayer of Fafnir, and she was married to a man who was a liar. Then Sigurd came and tried to comfort her, but she would not listen, and said she wished the sword stood fast in his heart. Not long to wait, he said, till the bitter sword stands fast in my heart, and thou wilt not live long when I am dead. But, my dear Brynhild, live and be comforted, and love Gunnar thy husband, and I will give all the gold and treasures of the dragon Fafnir. Brynhild said, It is too late. Then Sigurd was so grieved, and his heart so swelled in his breast, that it burst the steel rings of his shirt of mail. That can't be helped. Sigurd went out, and Brynhild determined to slay him. She mixed serpent vism and wolf's flesh, and gave them in one dish to her husband's younger brother. And when he had tasted them, he was mad. And he went into Sigurd's chamber while he slept, and pinned him to the bed with a sword. But Sigurd woke, and caught the sword Gram into his hand, and threw it at the man as he fled, and the sword cut him in twain. Thus died Sigurd, Fafnir's bane, whom no 10 men could have slain in fair fight. Then Gudrun wakened, and saw him dead, and she moaned aloud, and Brynhild heard her and laughed. Then the kind horse Granny lay down, and died of very grief. And then Brynhild fell weeping till her heart broke. So they attired Sigurd in all his golden armor, and built a great pile of wood on board his ship, and at night laid him in it the dead Sigurd, and the dead Brynhild, and the good horse Granny, and set fire to it, and launched the ship. And the wind bore it blazing out to sea, flaming into the dark. So there were Sigurd and Brynhild burned together, and the curse of the dwarf and the Vari fulfilled. Wow. I mean, really. If you know gold is cursed, you've seen that the gold is cursed, leave it alone. It's not hard. Cursed gold is cursed. And Unless, of course, you're a pirate who wants immortality and you don't really care how. But anyway, let us continue. Our third wonderful fairy tale for the night. Stan Bolovan from the Violet Fairy Book. Once upon a time, what happened did happen. And if it had not happened, this story would have never been told. On the outskirts of a village, where the oxen turned out to pasture and the pigs roamed about burrowing with their noses among the roots of trees, there stood a small house. In the house lived a man who had a wife, and the wife was sad all day long. "Dear wife, what is wrong with you that you hang your head like a drooping rosebud?" asked her husband one morning. "You have everything you want. Why can you not be merry like other women?"
"Leave me alone, and do not seek to know the reason,"
she replied, bursting into tears. And the man thought that it was no time to question her, and went away to his work. He could not, however, forget all about it, and a few days after he inquired again the reason of her sadness, but only got the same reply. At length he felt he could bear it no longer, and for a third time he asked. And then his wife turned and answered him.
"Good gracious," she cried, "you cannot let things be as they are. If I were to tell you, you would become just as wretched as myself. If you would only believe, it is far better for you to know nothing."
But no man yet has ever been content with such an answer. The more you beg him to not inquire, the greater is his curiosity in whole to learn.
"Well, if you must know,"
said the wife at last,
"I will tell you. There's no luck in this house, no luck at all."
"Is not your cow the best milker in the village?
"Are not your trees as full of fruit and your hives as full of bees
as anyone's cornfields like ours? Really, you talk nonsense when you say things like that."
"Yes, all you say that is true, but we have no children."
Then Stan understood. And when a man once understands, he has his eyes opened, it is no longer well with him. From that day, the little house in the outskirts contained an unhappy man, as well as an unhappy woman. And at the sight of her husband's misery, the woman became more wretched than ever. And so matters went on for some time. Some weeks had passed, and Stan thought he would consult a wise man who lived in the day's journey from his own house. The wise man was sitting before his door when he came up, and Stan fell on his knees before him. "Give me children, my lord, give me children."
"Take care what you are asking," replied the wise man. "Will not children be a burden to you? Are you rich enough to feed and clothe them?"
"Only give them to me, my lord, and I will manage somehow." And at that sign from the wise man, Stan went his way. He reached home that evening, tired and dusty, but with hope in his heart. As he drew near his house, a sound of voices struck upon his ear, and he looked up to see the whole place full of children. Children in the garden, children in the yard, children looking out of every window. It seems to the man as if all the children in the world must be gathered there. And none was bigger than the other, but each was smaller than the other. And every one was more noisy and impudent and more daring than the rest. And Stan gazed and grew cold with horror as he realized that they all belonged to him.
Good gracious, how many are there? How many?
He muttered to himself.
Oh, but not one too many,
smiled his wife, coming out with a crowd of more children clinging to her skirts. But even she found that it was not easy to look after 100 children. And when a few days had passed and they had eaten up all the food, and there was none in the house, they began to cry.
Father, I'm hungry! I'm hungry!
Till Stan scratched his head and wondered what he was to do next. It was not that he thought that there were too many children, no, for his life had seemed more full and of joy since they had appeared. But now it came to the point that he did not know how he was to feed them. The cow had ceased to give milk, and it was too early for the fruit trees to ripen. "Do you know, old woman," as he once said to his wife, "I must go out into the world and try to bring back food somehow, though I cannot tell where it has come from." To a hungry man, any road is long. And then there was always the thought that he had to satisfy 100 greedy children as well as himself. Stan wandered and wandered and wandered, till he reached the end of the world, where that which is mingled with that which is not. And there he saw, a little way off, a sheepfold, with 7 sheep in it. In the shadow of some trees lay the rest of the flock. Stan crept up, hoping that he might manage to decoy some of them away quietly, and drive them home for food for his family. But he soon found this could not be, for at midnight he heard the rushing noise, and through the air flew a dragon, who drove apart a ram, a sheep, and a lamb, and the 3 fine cattle that were lying down close by. Besides these, he took the milk of 77 sheep, and carried it home to his old mother, that she might bathe in it to grow young again. And this happened every night. The shepherd bewailed himself in vain. The dragon only laughed, and Stan saw that this was not the place to get food for his family. But though he quite understood that it was almost hopeless to fight against such a powerful monster, yet the thought of the hungry children at home clung to him like a burr, and would not be shaken off. And at last he said to the shepherd, "What will you give me to get rid of your dragon?" "1 of every 3 rams, 1 of every 3 sheep, and 1 of every 3 lambs," answered the herd. "It's a bargain," replied Stan, though at the moment he did not know how, supposing he did come off the victor, would he ever be able to drive so large a flock home. However, that answer could be settled later. At present night was not far off, and he must consider how best to fight with the dragon. Just at midnight, a horrible feeling that was new and strange came over Stan. A feeling that he could not put into words, even to himself, which almost forced him to give up the battle and take the shortest route home again. He half turned, and then he remembered the children, and returned back. "You or I," said Stan to himself, and he took up his position on the edge of the flock. "Stop!" he suddenly cried as the air was filled with a rushing noise, and the dragon came dashing past. "Dear me!" exclaimed the dragon, looking around. "Who are you, and where do you come from?" "I'm Stan Bolovan, who eats rocks at night, and in the day feeds on the flowers of the mountains. And if you meddle with those sheep, I will carve a cross in your back." When the dragon heard these words, he stood quite still in the middle of the road, for he knew he had met his match. "But you will have to fight me first," he said in a trembling voice, for when you faced him properly, he was not brave at all. "I fight you?" replied Stan. "Why, I could slay you with one breath." Then, stooping to pick up a large cheese which lay at his feet, he added, "Go and get a stone like this out of the river, so that we may lose no time in seeing who is the best man." The dragon did as Stan bade him, and brought back a stone out of the brook. "Can you get buttermilk out of your stone?" asked Stan. The dragon picked up his stone with one hand and squeezed it till it fell into powder, but no buttermilk flowed from it. "Of course I can't," he said, half angrily. "Well, if you can't, I can," answered Stan as he pressed the cheese till buttermilk flowed through his fingers. When the dragon saw that, he thought it was time he made the best of his way home, but Stan stood in his path. "We still have some accounts to settle," said he. "About what have you been doing here?" And the poor dragon was so frightened to stir, lest Stan should slay him at one breath, and bury him among the flowers at the mountain pastures. "Listen to me," he said at last. "I see you are a very useful person, and my mother has need of a fellow like you. Suppose you enter her service for 3 days, which are as long as one of your years, and she will pay you each day 7 sacks full of ducats." 3 times 7 sacks of ducats. The offer was very tempting, and Stan could not resist it. He did not waste words, but nodded to the dragon, and they started along the road. It was a long, long way, but when they came to the end they found the dragon's mother, who was as old as time itself, expecting them. Stan saw that her eyes shining like lamps from afar, and when they entered her house they beheld a huge kettle standing on the fire, filled with milk. When the old mother found that her son had arrived empty-handed, she grew very angry, and fire and flame darted from her nostrils before she could speak. The dragon turned to Stan. "Stay here," he said, "and wait for me. I am going to explain things to Mother." Stan was already repenting bitterly that he had ever come to such a place. But since he was there, there was nothing for it but to make everything quietly, and not show that he was afraid. "Listen, Mother," said the dragon as soon as they were alone. "I've brought this man in order to get rid of him. He is a terrific fellow who eats rocks and can press buttermilk from a stone. and he told her all that had happened the night before.
"Oh, just leave him to me," she said. "I have never yet met a man slip through my fingers."
So Stan had to stay and do the old mother service. The next day she told him that he and her son should try which was the strongest, and she took down a huge club bound 7 times with iron. The dragon picked it up as if it were a feather, and after whirling it around his head, he flung it 3 miles away, telling Stan to beat that if he could. They walked to the spot where the club lay. Stan stooped and felt it. Then a great fear came upon him, for he knew that all he and his children together would never lift that club from the ground. "What are you doing?" asked the dragon. "I was thinking what a beautiful club it was, and what a pity it is that it would cause your death." "What do you mean, my death?" asked the dragon. "Only that I am afraid that if I throw it you will never see another dawn. You don't know how strong I am." "Oh, never mind. Be quick and throw." "If you are really in earnest, let us go and feast for 3 days. That will at least give you 3 extra days of life." Stan spoke so calmly that this time the dragon began to get a little frightened, though he did not quite believe that things could be so bad as Stan said. They returned to the house, took all the food that could be found in the mother's larder, and carried it back to the place where the club was lying. Then Stan seated himself on the sack of provisions and remained quietly watching the setting moon. "What are you doing?" asked the dragon. "Waiting till the moon gets out of my way." "What do you mean? I don't understand." "Don't you see that the moon is exactly in my way? But of course, if you like, I will throw the club into the moon." At these words, the dragon grew uncomfortable for a second time. He prized the club, and which he had left him by his grandfather, very highly, and had no desire that it should be lost in the moon. "I'll tell you what," he said, after thinking a little. "Don't throw the club at all. I will throw it a second time, and that will do just as well." "No, certainly not," replied Stan. "Just wait till the moon sets." But the dragon, in dread lest Stan should fulfill his threats, tried what bribes he could, and in the end had to promise Stan 7 sacks of ducats before he was suffered to throw back the club himself. "Oh, dear me, that is indeed a strong man," said the dragon, turning to his mother. "Would you believe it that I had had the greatest difficulty preventing him from throwing the club into the moon?" Then the old woman grew uncomfortable too. Only to think of it! It was no joke to throw things into the moon. So no more was heard of the club, and the next day they had all something else to think about.
"Go and fetch me water,"
said the mother when the morning broke, and gave them 12 buffalo skins in order to keep filling them till night. They set out once more for the brook, and in the twinkling of an eye the dragon had filled the whole 12, and carried them into the house, and brought them back to Stan. Stan was tired. He could scarcely lift the buckets when they were empty, and he shuddered to think of what would happen when they were full. But he only took a knife out of his pocket and began to scratch up the earth near the brook. "What are you doing there? How are you going to carry water into the house?" asked the dragon. "How? Dear me, that is easy enough. I will just take the brook." At these words, the dragon's jaw dropped. This was the last thing that had ever entered his head, for the brook had been as it was since the days of his grandfather. "I'll tell you what. Let me carry the skins for you." "Most certainly not," he said. Sans was again going on with his digging, and the dragon, in dread lest he should fulfill his threat, tried what bribes would do, and in the end had again to promise 7 sacks of ducats before Stan would agree to leave the brook alone, and let him carry the water back into the house. On the 3rd day, the old mother sent Stan to the forest for wood, and as usual, the dragon went with him. Before you could count 3, he had pulled up more trees than Stan could have cut down in a lifetime, and had arranged them neatly in rows. When the dragon was finished, Stan began to look about him, and choosing the biggest of the trees, climbed up it, and breaking off a long rope of wild vine, bound the top of the tree to the next one. And he did so the whole line of trees. "What are you doing there?" asked the dragon. "You can see for yourself," answered Stan, going on quietly about his work. "Why are you tying the trees together?" "Not to give myself unnecessary work. When I pull one up, all the others will come up too." "But how will you carry them home?" "Dear me, do you not understand that I'm going to take the whole forest back with me?" said Stan, tying 2 other trees as he spoke. "I'll tell you what," cried the dragon, trembling with fear at the thought of the thing. "Let me carry the wood for you, and you shall have 7 times 7 stacks full of gold ducats." "You are a good fellow, and I agree to your proposal," answered Stan, and the dragon carried the wood. Now the 3 days' service, which were to be reckoned as a year, were over, and the only thing that disturbed Stan was how to get all those ducats back to his home. In the evening the dragon and his mother had a long talk, but Stan heard every word said through a crack in the ceiling. "Woe be to us, mother," said the dragon. "This man will soon get us into his power. Give him his money and let us be rid of him." But the old mother was fond of money, and did not like this.
"Listen to me," she said. "You must murder him this very night."
I am afraid," answered he.
"There is nothing to fear," replied the old woman. "When he is asleep, take the club and hit him on the head with it. It is easily done."
And so it would have been, had not Stan heard all about it. And when the dragon and his mother had put out their lights, he took the pig's trough and filled it with earth, and placed it in his bed, and covered it in with clothes. Then he hid himself underneath, and began to snore loudly. Very soon the dragon stole softly into the room, and gave a tremendous blow on the spot where Stan's head should have been. Stan groaned loudly from under the bed, and the dragon went away as softly as he had come. Directly he had closed the door, Stan lifted out the pig's trough, and lay down himself, after making everything clean and tidy. But he was wise enough not to shut his eyes that night. The next morning he came into the room when the dragon and his mother were having their breakfast. "Good morning," said he. Good morning. How did you sleep? Oh, very well, but I dreamed that a flea had bit me, and I seem to feel it still. The dragon and his mother looked at each other. Did you hear that? Whispered he. He talks to the flea. I broke my club on his head. This time the mother grew as frightened as her son. There was nothing to be done with a man like this, and she made haste to fill the sacks with ducats, as soon as to get rid of Stan, as soon as possible. But on his side, Stan was trembling like an aspen. He could not lift even one sack from the ground, but he stood still and looked at them. What are you standing there for? Asked the dragon. Oh, I was standing here because it was just occurred to me that I should like to stay in your service for another year. I'm ashamed that when I get home they should see that I brought back so little. I know that they will cry out, just look at Stan Bolovan, who in 1 year has grown as weak as a dragon. Here a shriek of dismay was heard from both dragon and his mother, who declared that they would give him 7, or even 7 times 7, the number of sacks, if he would just go away. Hey, Jeff Knight, can see you pop in. I'll tell you what, said Stan at last. I see you don't want me to stay, and I should be very sorry to make myself disagreeable. I will go at once, but only on one condition, that you will carry the money home for yourself, so that I may not have to be put to shame before my friends. The words were hardly out of his mouth before the dragon had snatched up the sacks and piled them on his back. Then he and Stan set forth. The way, though, really was not far, and was yet too long for Stan. But at length he heard his children's voices and stopped short. He did not wish the dragon to know where he lived, lest one day he should come back and take his treasure. There was nothing he could say to get rid of the monster. Suddenly an idea came into Stan's head, and he turned around. I hardly know what to do, said he. I have 100 children, and I'm afraid they might do you harm. They are always ready for a fight. However, I will do my best to protect you. 100 children. That was indeed no joke. The dragon let fall the sacks from terror, and then picked up again. But the children, who had had nothing to eat since their father had left home, came rushing towards him, waving knives in their right hands and forks in their left, and crying, Give us dragon flesh! Give us dragon flesh! At this dreadful sight, the dragon waited no longer. He flung down his sacks where he stood and took flight as fast as he could, so terrified at the fate that awaited him from that day as he has never dared to show his face in the world again. Oh, man, that has a lot of different story elements in it. Oh, okay, that story was a little bit longer than I expected it to be, but it was another nice rambling one. Those are the best kind. Oh, let's see, that's has at least things from 2 or 3 different stories that I've read before. We got you. Oh, Machan. Okay. see. How was this next one? Oh, sorry. Oh. Yep. Always need to hydrate because if nothing else, doing the voices really does take a bit of a toll on the voice. Okay. Let's see, what is the next story? Oh, how brave Walter hunted wolves. Oh, yeah, these names are going to be fun to do. I mean, the name Walter isn't bad, but Herculicu is. Trute. You know, you can get other Pokeballs that do increase the chances of catching it. Oh, just found it out. Yeah, because I think the Ultra Balls are supposed to give you an 80% chance. Somehow I still managed to mess with them. No problem. Okay, let's see. Da-da-da-da. This is only the fourth story. Damn. Let me do two, maybe three more. It's a little here. Ah, well, I'll just shoot for two. Anyway. The next story, which isn't one of my favorite topics because it involves hunting wolves. Uh, How Brave Walter Hunted Wolves from the Lilac Storybook. A little back from the high road there stands a house which is called Hemgard. Perhaps you remember two beautiful mountains and ash trees by the reddish brown palings and the high gate, and the garden with the beautiful barberry bushes, which are always the first to become grown in spring, and which in summer are weighted down with their beautiful berries. Behind the garden there is a hedge with tall aspens which rustle in the morning wind. Behind the hedge is a road, and behind the road is a wood, and behind the wood is the wide world. But on the other side of the garden there's a lake, and beyond the lake is a village, and all around stretch meadows and fields, now yellow and green. It is a pretty house, which has white window frames, a neat porch, clean steps, and which are always strewn with finely cut juniper trees. Walter's parents live in this house. His brother Frederick, his sister Lotta, old Lena, Jonah, Carl, and Bravo, Puta and Murray, and Kukiliku. Carol lives in the doghouse, Bravo in the stable, and Puta in the stableman. Murray a little here and a little there. And Kukiliku lives in the henhouse. That is his kingdom. Walter is 6 years old, and he must soon begin to go to school. He cannot yet read, and he can do many things. He can turn cartwheels, stand on his head, ride a seesaw, throw snowballs, play ball, crow like a cock, eat bread and butter, and drink sour milk, tear his trousers, wear holes in his elbows, break the crockery into pieces, throw balls through window panes, draw old men on important papers, walk over the flower beds, and eat himself sick with gooseberries, as well being well after a whipping. For the rest, he has a good heart, but a bad memory, and forgets his father's and mother's and so often gets into trouble and meets with adventures, as you shall hear. But first of all, I must tell you how brave he was, and how he hunted wolves. Once in the spring, a little before midsummer, Walter heard that there was a great many wolves in the wood, and that pleased him. He was wonderfully brave when he was in the midst of his companions or at home with his brothers and sisters. Then he often used to say, "One wolf is nothing. There ought to be at least 4. When he wrestled with Klaas Borgenstrom and Filthroth Waterfeld and struck them on the back, he would say, "That is what I would do to a wolf." And when he shot arrows at Jonas and they rattled against the sheepskin's coat, he would say, "And that is how I would shoot you if you were a wolf." I don't like this kid. Indeed, some thought that the brave boy boasted a little, but one must indeed believe him since he said it so himself. So Jonas and Lena used to say of him, "Look, there goes Walter. He shoots the wolves." And other boys and girls would say, "Look, there goes Walter, who is brave enough to fight with 4." There was no one so fully convinced of this as Walter himself. And and one day he prepared himself for a real wolf hunt. He took him his drum, which had holes in it on one end, since the time he had climbed up to reach a cluster of merlinberries, and his tin saber, which was a little broken because he had terrible courage and fought his way through an unfriendly army of gooseberry bushes. He did not forget to arm himself to the teeth with his pop gun, and his bow, and his air pistol. He had a burnt cork in his pocket to blacken with his mustache, and a red cock's feather to put in his cap to make himself look fierce. He had besides in his trouser pocket a clasp knife with a bone handle to cut off the ears of wolves as soon as he had killed them. For he thought it would be cruel to do that while they were still living. Just a bit. Not that humans don't doctor animals anyway. It was such a good thing that Jonas was going with corn to the mill, for Walter got a seat with the load, while Carol ran barking alongside them. As soon as they came to the wood, Walter looked cautiously around him to see perchance if there was a wolf in the bushes. And he did not omit to ask Jonas if wolves were afraid of a drum. Like, of course they are. That is understood, said Jonas. Thereupon Walter began to beat his drum with all his might while they were going through the wood. That's what that sound was. Okay. When they came to the mill, Walter immediately asked if there had been any wolves in the neighborhood lately. Alas, yes, said the miller. Last night the wolves have eaten our fattest ram, there by the kiln, not far from here. Ah, said Walter. Do you think that there are many of them? We don't know, answered the miller.
Oh, it is all the same, said Walter. I only asked if I should know that I should have to take Jonas with me. I could manage very well with 3, but if there were more, I might not have time to kill them all before they ran away. In Walter's place, I should go quite alone. It is more manly, said Jonas. No, it is better for you to come too, said Walter. Perhaps there are many. No, I have not the time, said Jonas. And besides, there are sure not more than 3. Walter can manage them very well alone. Yes, said Walter. Certainly I could, but you see, Jonas, it might happen that one of them might bite me in the back, and I should have more trouble in killing them. If I only knew that there was not more than 2, I should not mind. For them, I should take one each in hand and give them a good shaking, like Susanna once shook me. I certainly think there will not be more than 2, said Jonas. There are never more than 2 when they come to slay children and rams. Walter can very well shake any 2 of them without me. But you see, Jonas, said Walter, if there are 2, it may still happen that one of them escapes and bites me in the leg. For you see, I am not so very strong in my left hand as I am my right. You can very well come with me and take a good stick in case there really are 2. Look, if there's only one, I shall take him with both hands and throw him living onto his back, and then I can kick as much as he likes, and I shall hold him fast. Now, when I really think over the thing, said Jonas, I am almost sure there will not be more than 1. What would 2 do with 1 ram? There will certainly not be more than 1. But you should come with me all the same, Jonas, said Walter. You see, I can very well manage 1, but I'm not accustomed to wolves yet, and he might tear holes in my new trousers. Well, just listen, said Jonas. I'm beginning to think that Walter is not so brave as people say. First of all, Walter would go fight against 4, and then against 3, and then 2, and then 1. And now Walter wants me to help with 1. Such a thing must never be. What would people say? People would say that Walter is a coward. That is a lie, said Walter. I am not at all frightened and more amusing when there are 2. I only want someone to see how well I can strike the wolf and how the dust flies off his skin. Well then, Walter, can you take the miller's little Lisa with them? She can sit on a stone and look on, said Jonas. No, she would certainly be frightened, said Walter. How would it do for a girl to go wolf hunting? Come with me, Jonas, and you shall have the skin, and I will be content with the ears and the tail. No, thank you, said Jonas. Walter can keep the skin for himself. Now, I see quite well that he is frightened. Fine. Shame on him. This touched Walter's pride very near. I shall show that I'm not frightened, he said. And so he took his drum, saber, and cock's feather, and clasp knife and pop gun and air pistol, and went off quite alone into the wood to hunt wolves. It was a beautiful evening, and the birds were singing in all the branches. Walter went very slowly and cautiously. At every step he looked all around him to see if perchance there was anything lurking behind stones. He quite thought something moved away there in a ditch. Perhaps it was a wolf. It is better for me to beat the drum a little bit before I go, thought Walter. And so he beats his drum. Then something moved again. Caw! Ah! A crow flew up from the ditch. Walter immediately regained courage. It was well I took my drum with me, he thought.
and went straight on with courageous steps. Very soon he came quite close to the kiln, where the wolves had killed the ram. But the nearer he came, the more dreadful he thought the kiln looked. It was grey and old. Who knew how many wolves there might be hidden there? Perhaps the very ones which killed the ram were still there, sitting in a corner. Yes, it was not at all safe here, and there were no other people to be seen in the neighborhood. It would be horrible to be eaten up here in daylight, so thought Walter to himself. And the more he thought about it, the uglier and grayer the old kiln looked, and the more horrible and dreadful it seemed to become the food of wolves. Shall I go back and say I struck one wolf and escaped? Thought Walter. Fie, said his conscience. Do you not remember that a lie is one of his worst sins, both you in the sight of God and man? If you tell a lie today and you are struck to a wolf, tomorrow it will surely eat you up. No, I will go to the kiln, thought Walter, and so he went. But he did not quite go near. He went only so near as he could see the ram's blood, which covered the grass, colored it red, and some tufts of wool which the wolves had torn from the back of the poor animal. It looked dreadful. I wonder what the ram thought as they ate him up, thought Walter to himself. And just then a cold shiver ran through him from his collar right down to his boots. It is better for me to beat the drum, he thought to himself again, and as he began to beat it, but it sounded horrid, and an echo came out of the kiln that almost seemed like the howl of a wolf. The drumstick stiffened in Walter's hands, and he thought, now they are coming. Yes, sure enough, just then a shaggy, reddish-brown wolf's head looked out from under the kiln. What did Walter do now? Yes, the brave Walter, who alone could manage four, threw his drum away, took to his heels and ran as fast as he could back to the mill. But alas, the wolf ran after him. Walter looked back. The wolf was quicker than he and was only a few steps behind him. Then Walter ran faster, but fear got the better of him. He neither heard nor saw anything more. He ran over sticks and stones and ditches. He lost drumsticks, saber, bow, and air pistol, and his terrible hurry he tripped over a tuft of grass. There he lay, and the wolf jumped on him. It was a gruesome tale. You may now as well believe that it was all over with for Walter and his adventures. But that would have been a pity. But do not be surprised if it is so not quite so bad as that. For the wolf was quite a friendly one. He certainly jumped on Walter, but he only took his coat and rubbed his nose against his face. And Walter shrieked. He shrieked terribly. Happily, Jonas heard the cries of distress, for Walter was quite near the mill, and he ran up and helped him. What has happened? He asked. Why did Walter scream so terribly? A wolf! A wolf! Cried Walter. And that was all he could say. Where's the wolf? Said Jonas. I don't see any wolf. Take care, he is here. He has bit me to death, groaned Walter. And then Jonas began to laugh. Yes, he laughed so terribly that he nearly burst his skin belt. Well, what was the wolf? Was that the wolf which Walter has taken his neck and shake and throw him on his back, no matter how much it struggled? Just look a little closer at him. He's your old friend. Your good old Carl. I quite expected he found a leg of the ram in the kiln when Walter beat his drum. Caro crept out, and when Walter ran away, Caro ran after him, as he does so often when Walter wants to romp and play. Down, Caro. You ought to be rather ashamed of yourself to put such a great fight. Walter got up, feeling very foolish.
Down, Caro,
He said, both relieved and annoyed.
it was only a dog. Then if it had been a wolf, I certainly would have been killed.
If Walter would listen to my advice and boast a little less, and do just a little more, said Jonas consolingly. Walter is not a coward, is he?
You see, Jonas, when we met a bear, I would like so much better to fight with bears.
Indeed, laughed Jonas. Are you at it again? Dear Walter, remember that it is only cowards who boast. A really brave man never talks about his bravery. Oh, that poor little boy would have been. Oh well. Okay, let me go ahead and see if I can get one more story in for the night. Brave Walter, indeed. Okay, next story, maybe the final one for the evening. Laughing Eye and Weeping Eye, or The Limping Fox, from the Grey Fairy book. Once upon a time there lived a man whose right eye always smiled, and whose left eye always cried. And he had 3 sons. 2 of them were very clever. The third, well, was an idiot. Now these 3 sons were very curious about the peculiarity of their father's eyes, and as they could not puzzle out the reason for themselves, they determined to ask their father why he did not have eyes like proper people. The eldest son of the 3 went out one day into the father's room and put the question straight out. But instead of answering, the man flew into a fearful rage and sprang at him with a knife. The young fellow ran away in a terrible fright and took refuge with his brothers, who were awaiting anxiously the result of the interview. "You'd better go yourselves," was all the reply they got, "and see if you will fare any better." Upon hearing this, the second son entered the father's room, only to be treated in the same manner as his brother, and back he came telling the youngest, fool of the family, that it was his turn to try his luck. Then the youngest brother marched boldly up to his father and said to him,
My brothers would not let me know the answer you had given them to their question. But now, do tell me why your right eye is always smiling and your left eye is always weeping.
As before, the father grew purple with fury and rushed forward with his knife. But the simpleton did not stir a step. He knew that he really was nothing to fear from his father. "Ah, now you see who is my true son," exclaimed the old man.
The others were mere cowards, and you have shown me that you are brave. I will satisfy your curiosity. My right eye laughs because I am glad to have a son like you. My left eye weeps because a precious treasure has been stolen from me. I had in my garden a vine that yielded a ton of wine every hour. Someone has managed to steal it, and I weep its loss.
So would I. That sucks. The simpleton returned to his brothers and told them of their father's loss, and they all made up their minds to set out at once in search of the vine. They traveled together till they came across some crossroads, and there they parted, the two elder ones taking one road, and the simpleton the other. "Thank goodness we've got rid of that idiot," exclaimed the two elder. "Now let us have some breakfast." And they sat down by the roadside and began to eat. They had only half finished when a lame fox came out of the wood and begged them to give him something to eat. But they jumped up and chased him off with their sticks, and the poor fox limped away on 3 pads. As he ran, he reached a spot where the youngest son was getting out food and he had brought with him, and the fox asked him for a crust of bread. The simpleton had not very much for himself, but he gladly gave half of his meal to the hungry fox.
"Where are you going, brother?"
said the fox, when he had finished his share of the bread. And the young man told him the story of his father and the wonderful wine.
"Dear me, how lucky!" said the fox. "I know what has become of it. Follow me."
So they went on till they came to the gate of a large garden.
"You'll find here the vine you are seeking, but it will not be at all easy to get to. You must listen carefully to what I am going to say. Before you reach the vine, you will have to pass 12 outposts, each consisting of 2 guards. You will see these guards looking straight at you, but go on without fear, for they are asleep. But their eyes are shut, then beware, for they are wide awake. If you once get to the vine, you will find 2 shovels, one of wood and one is made of iron. Do not take the iron one. It will make noise and rouse the guards, and then you are lost."
The young man got safely through the garden without any adventures until he came to the vine which yielded a ton of wine an hour. But he thought that he should find it impossible to dig the hard earth with only a wooden shovel, so he picked up the iron one instead. The noise it made soon awakened the guards, and they seized the poor simpleton and carried him to their master. "Why did you try to steal my vine?" demanded he. "How did you manage to get past the guards?" "The vine is not yours. It belongs to my father, and if you will not give it to me now, I will return and get it somehow." "You shall have the vine if you bring me in exchange an apple off the golden apple tree that flowers every 24 hours, that bears fruit of gold." So saying, he gave orders to the simpleton should be released, and this done, the youth hurried off to consult the fox.
"Now you see," observed the fox, "this comes of not following my advice. However, I will help you get the gold apple. It grows in a garden that you will easily recognize from my description. Near the apple tree are 2 poles, one of gold, the other of wood. Take the wooden pole and you will be able to reach the apple."
Master Simpleton listened carefully to all that the fox told him, and after crossing the garden, he and escaping before the men who were watching it, he soon arrived at the apple tree. But he was so dazzled at the sight of the beautiful golden fruit that he quite forgot what the fox had said. He seized the golden pole and struck the branch a sounding blow. The guards at once awoke and conducted him to their master. Then the simpleton had to tell his story. "I will give you the golden apple," said the owner of the garden, "if you will bring me in exchange a horse which can go around the world in 24 hours." And the young man departed, and went to find the fox. This time the fox was really angry, and no wonder.
If you had listened to me, you would have been home with your father by this time. However, I am willing to help you once more. Go into the forest and you will find a horse with 2 halters around his neck. One is of gold and the other is of hemp. Don't smoke it. Lead him to the hempen halter, or else the horse will begin to neigh and will waken the guards. Then all is over for you.
So Master Simpleton went until he found the horse, and he was struck dumb by its beauty. Speechless, he was already pretty dumb. "What?" he said to himself. "Put the hempen halter on an animal like that? Not I, indeed." Then the horse neighed loudly, and the guards seized our young idiotic friend and conducted him before their master. "I will give you the golden horse," said the owner, "if you bring me in exchange a golden maiden who has never seen either sun or moon." "But if I am going to bring you the golden maiden, you must lend me the golden steed with which to seek her." "Ah," replied the owner of the golden horse, "but who will undertake that you will never come back?" "I swear on the head of my father," answered the young man, "that I will bring back either the maiden or the horse." And he went away to consult the fox. Now, the fox, who had always been patient and charitable to other people's faults, led him to the entrance of a deep grotto, where stood a maiden all of gold and as beautiful as day. He placed her on his horse and prepared to mount.
Are you not sorry, said the fox, to give such a lovely maiden in exchange for a horse? Yet you are bound to do it, for you have sworn by the head of your father. But perhaps I could manage to take her place."
So saying, the fox transformed itself into another golden maiden, so like the first that hardly anyone could tell the difference between the two. The simpleton took her straight to the owner of the horse, who was enchanted with her. And the young man got back to his father's vine and married the real golden maiden into the bargain. And that would be dumb luck. This is why you help wild animals when they come to approach you, because you never know if it's going to be a fey trick. Let's see. Should I read Little Hair? Little Hair looks a little. It looks a little longer. Oh, Little Hair is a lot longer. Let's see. Little Hair is 9 pages. Yeah, I'll go ahead and save Little Hair for next week. Oh, not next week because I'm going to be out of town. I will. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to be back Friday night or not. Because I'm not going to be here next Thursday for Sherlock Holmes. Because I'm going to be at my grandmother's for her 93rd birthday. Yeah. So let me see who might be on to raid. Because I do like to raid people. Man, how many people have been playing Baldur's Gate today? I do have raid masters. Raid masters, I've got one for followers with normal emotes. And one for subscribers if you subscribe. Either one works. So I'm going back to the bookstore. Yes. The bookstore, the place where I work. At least act like I work. I pretend that I work. Does that count? Okay. Let's see. Anyone? Don't see any of the other readers on right now. See lots of people playing Baldur's Gate, which I will not be able to afford for some time. And even then, my computer doesn't like to play games. I read Ping. Ping's cool. If I can spell her name correctly. Yes, it is going to let me read. It says I only have one viewer, but what the hell. Ping is a pretty cool person. A little crazy, but that's the best kind of people. So yeah, let's go drop in on Ping. Again, got the raid messages up, and hopefully it won't be so long until my next stream. I might try to do another game stream tomorrow night. I don't know. Depends on if my computer wants to cooperate with me or not. So I will see you over there if you're here. And have a good evening, morning, afternoon, whatever it may be. Later.